The night before my wedding, Daniel called me at 11:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I stared at my phone for a long moment before answering. My dress was hanging on the closet door. My suitcase was half packed for the honeymoon. His voice sounded smaller than usual. My parents, they think I should reconsider. That was the word he used. Reconsider. As if we were discussing dinner plans, not a ceremony scheduled for the next morning. There was another girl. Someone his parents had recently introduced him to. Someone more suitable. Someone whose family apparently aligned better with theirs. I didn't cry during the call. I didn't argue either. I listened while he stumbled through apologies that felt like lines he'd practiced. By midnight, the wedding was gone. Friends and relatives were still arriving in town. The venue had been decorated hours earlier. My phone began lighting up with confused messages as the news spread. I turned it off. Within 2 months, I moved to another city. Not dramatically, not to escape. It just felt easier to start somewhere new where people didn't lower their voices when I entered a room. The first year after that was quieter than I expected. There was embarrassment at first, then anger, then something slower. A strange calm that came with rebuilding a life piece by piece. Work became the center of everything. I focused on projects, long hours, practical things. Slowly, the story of the canceled wedding stopped feeling like the defining moment of my life. It became something else. A turning point. Then, almost exactly 1 year later, an invitation arrived. Daniel was getting married. The card was formal and stiff, like a business announcement. No personal note. Just the date, the venue, and 2 familiar names printed neatly beside the word parents. I almost threw it away. But curiosity has a quiet persistence. Eventually, I decided to go. Not for revenge, not even for closure. Just to see the life that had replaced the one we almost had. The reception was being held in a hotel ballroom filled with white flowers and polished glass tables. Everything looked expensive, but strangely tense. When I walked in, a few people recognized me immediately. They tried not to show it. Eyes lingered too long. Conversations paused and restarted. Daniel's parents stood near the entrance greeting guests, their smiles tightening when they saw me. No one said anything. I took a seat near the back of the room. Daniel looked older, or maybe just more careful. When our eyes briefly met across the room, he looked away first. Then the bride entered. She was beautiful in the composed way brides often are, calm smile, steady posture, bouquet held carefully in both hands. She moved through the room greeting guests, thanking relatives, accepting congratulations. When she turned toward my table, she didn't notice me at first. Then she did. Her entire expression changed. The bouquet slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. The room went silent as she stared at me. "Oh my God," she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the entire reception. "She's my..." She stopped, almost laughing in disbelief. Before anyone could react, she walked straight across the room toward me. Daniel looked confused. His parents looked alarmed. When she reached my table, her face had softened into something like astonishment. "I can't believe it's you," she said quietly. For a moment, I didn't understand. Then I recognized her. 3 years earlier, before I had even met Daniel, she had been a junior employee at a consulting firm where I worked briefly as a project advisor. She had been struggling badly at the time, one mistake after another. The kind of situation where someone's career can quietly disappear before it really begins. I had spent weeks helping her restructure her work, preparing presentations with her late into the evenings, coaching her through meetings she was terrified to attend. Eventually she recovered, more than recovered. She thrived. Now she stood in front of me in a wedding dress. "You probably don't remember how much you helped me," she said, shaking her head slightly. "If you hadn't stepped in back then, I would have lost that job. Everything that happened after that, My promotion, the new company, even meeting Daniel. Her voice trailed off as the realization spread through the room. The woman Daniel's parents had chosen over me was someone whose success had been built, in part, with my help. I hadn't known. Neither had they. Daniel's mother looked deeply uncomfortable now. The confidence she'd worn earlier had faded. No one seemed sure what to say. The bride reached down, picked up her bouquet, and smiled at me again. "Thank you," she said simply. I nodded. There wasn't really anything else to add. A few minutes later, I slipped out of the ballroom quietly. Outside, the evening air was cool and calm. As I walked toward the parking lot, I realized something that hadn't been clear before. The worst night of my life, the phone call, the humiliation, the wedding that never happened, had quietly pushed me into a version of myself that no longer needed approval from that family. Or from Daniel. For the first time in a long while, the memory didn't feel heavy anymore. It just felt finished.